It's December 21st, 2019, and another remarkable event is about to be uncovered by Arion, Rebecca, and Olly, the Retrospectors.
She's as festive as Michael Bublé with added cleavage and sass, and yet for decades the Christmas #1 slot had eluded Mariah Carey. But that's all changed on this day in 2019, when 25 years after its initial release, All I Want for Christmas Is You, the Christmas standard that literally nobody hates, finally reached the top of the Billboard Hot 100.
And that achievement is even more remarkable given the fact that the Christmas #1 is not really a thing in the US. And in fact, this was the only Christmas song to top the Billboard Hot 100 since 1958, when the Chipmunks spent 4 weeks at #1 with the Chipmunk Song.
It also broke the record for highest charting holiday song by a solo artist, the most streamed track on Spotify within 24 hours, brackets female, and the most weeks in the UK singles top 10 chart for a Christmas song. So 2019 was a good year for Mariah Carey, and this song in particular.
Although, of course, it wasn't a good year for Mariah Carey in every other way, was it?
True.
That's the really bizarre thing about the revival of this song, is that she's fashionable at this time of year in exactly the same way as Michael Bublé, right? But the rest of the year, yes, she sort of does hip-hop, and yes, she sort of has credibility amongst people that grew up in the 90s. But really, like, her histrionic singing style hit its peak when she did in the mid-90s, and her style feels like overkill. Ungepatch is the Yiddish word for it. At any other time of the year, apart from Christmas. I feel like that's the secret sauce here. You can't oversing at Christmas.
Well, the funny thing was that famously she thought that it was too early in her career to be taking on a Christmas album, of which this was a part. You would have expected perhaps for her to come at it maybe at this point in her career, you know, once she's sort of the grand dame of R&B and pop. But at the time when she recorded it, she was sort of thinking, is this the wrong move for a 24-year-old?
Yeah, and even more so, given that this was a time when new Christmas classics were really thin on the ground. Not so much in the UK. Cliff Richard was keeping the home fires burning. We'd had the Pogue, Shakin' Stevens. But in the US...
Wham! Don't leave Wham out the list.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because that's what I was...
It's vital that I say that.
That's exactly what I was going to say. In the US, when Mariah released All I Want for Christmas in 1993, it had been 9 years since the last big Christmas hit, and that was Last Christmas, which was a hit on both sides of the Atlantic for Wham.
But a lot is made of the style of the song. You know, it's kind of Phil Spector, Wall of Sound, 1960s revival thing. No one else was making songs like this at the time. But I'm not really sure that's true, because I grew up in the 90s and the 60s revival was a big thing in the 90s. Like, we had Britpop and we had Austin Powers. So what was so different about this, really? I think she just totally aced it.
Yeah. I read a quite in-depth article by a musical theorist called Adam Ragusea.
Yeah, did that make you feel learned? We're talking about a 3-minute pop song, Arion. It's fine. You can read mental floss.
It evidently made him feel learned, because he said it had 13 chords where most rock and pop songs have about 4 chords. It also had this minor subdominant chord. I'm just taking his word for it.
No, it doesn't.
Putting all of this stuff together evoked that kind of 1940s Judy Garland, Nat King Cole thing, while also the rhythm and the instrumentation was Motown era.
But we're talking about how the song is musically accomplished, but at the time Carey herself didn't seem to expect great things from it. This was like a comment that she made at the time of the release of the album. It was definitely a priority for me to write at least a few new songs, but for the most part, people really want to hear the standards at Christmas time, no matter how good a new song is.
She won't be saying that now that her bank account is swollen annually by about $500,000 by some estimates. Apparently she's made about $60 million in her career to date.
And that's because obviously she's the performer of the song, but she's also the co-writer of the song. And, you know, I genuinely do not want to take away from the fact that Mariah Carey appears by every possible account to have co-written this Christmas anthem. However, it is notable, isn't it, that in every interview she's given for the last 10 years, she very much gives the impression that she did it herself. And I went digging around, and there is a co-writer, and that man is Walter Afanasieff, who also co-wrote Hero. And it's interesting because when Mariah Carey talks about writing those other big ballads from the 90s, she credits him. But she tells the story of, I mean, it links to our episode yesterday because she says she put on It's a Wonderful Life in the house and got into the Christmas mood and sat down at the keyboard and wrote the song and neglects to mention that the man pressing the keys was Walter Afanasieff. It's really bizarre, but they've fallen out about it. And in 2019, on this day when it finally reached number one, Afanasieff tweeted to say, this song that I co-wrote has got to number one, how exciting, or words to that effect. And of course, the Carey fandom, they call themselves lambs, all jumped on him and basically told him he hadn't written the song. Wow. It's a really, really weird corner of the internet where he then had to give an interview to say, like, people are threatening my life because I'm saying that, like, he's had the royalties from this song since 1993, but there are deniers of this fact because it doesn't, coincide with Saint Mariah.
Well, maybe it was a bit too little too late, in part because at the time, apparently, he didn't much like the song.
Everyone didn't like it at the time.
He told Business Insider in a 2013 interview, "My first reaction was, that sounds like someone doing vocal scales. Are you sure that's what you want?" I'm like, isn't that a criticism that could be leveled at any Mariah song?
Yeah. How did he have the tolerance to write 3 albums with her? I think another secret to its success, especially against some of the other songs on that Mariah Carey album, one of them literally starts with Jesus, Jesus, is that it is noticeably un-Jesus-y. There's a reference to Saint Nick. That's as religious as it gets. And I think that, coupled with the fact it's a love song, and a non-gendered love song, anyone can listen to it and think, it doesn't matter what religion you are, it doesn't matter what gender you are, and identify with an upbeat love song you can dance to.
And so the reason that it took so long to get to number one is not that suddenly in 2019 everyone experienced an overwhelming wave of enthusiasm for this 25-year-old song.
Although that is what you feel when you press play. All I Want for Christmas Is You.
Well, this is more of a side effect of what I would call the Mr. Brightside phenomenon, which is the rejigging of the charts to allow for both song purchases and, even more importantly, streaming. After all, you can only buy a CD once, right? So if you've bought Mariah Carey's Christmas album, you might play it every single year, but that's never going to be counted in the charts again.
Oh, imagine if my CD purchases from 1994 still counted towards the chart. There'd be a lot of Culture Beat and Ace of Base.
It was pretty controversial at the time when the charts announced that they were going to take into account streams. But actually, I think the new method is so much better because it ensures that the charts represent what the country is actually listening to rather than, the tiny percentage of what they're listening to of the things that just came out to buy.
So why did you mention Mr. Brightside? Is that what the Killers did too?
But Mr. Brightside actually never got to number one. It peaked at number 10 in the UK, I think. But it spent the last 5 years in the top 100.
Wow.
Because people just bloody love listening to it.
But also maybe it is due to the fact that every year it's sort of got a semi-literal snowball effect, that you're getting more and more Mariah, and it is the go-to Christmas song. And so it's not surprising that it ends up back in the charts when it's the thing that all the stores are playing. It's the thing that you're hearing streamed absolutely everywhere. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
But also that voice. Like, no one else, maybe Christina Aguilera, maybe Whitney Houston, basically no one else sings like Mariah Carey. There's a reason that no one of note has ever covered this song. And that's because you cannot do what she does, right? Yeah. It's like with other Christmas standards, which I think we can call this now, like, I don't know, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. There's 10 different versions, but everyone's listening to this version. There is no other version.
There is also a Bublé version.
There is no other version. There is actually a Mariah Carey and Justin Bieber version, I believe, from about 10 years ago. But again, I mean, the very fact that Bieber had to have Carey on his version tells you there is no other version.
And as I was looking into this, it kind of got me wondering, what was the last stone cold, timeless Christmas classic that we had?
Whoa.
I had 2, and they're both from 2013, so I don't know if you guys have any expansion on these. One, Underneath the Tree, Kelly Clarkson.
Yes! I'm so glad you said that. I mean, you can hear the enthusiasm of a man who's depped on magic on Christmas Eve.
No.
Out of the whole easy listening playlist from the last 20 years, I genuinely think Underneath the Tree is the only thing that comes close to All I Want for Christmas Is You.
My husband loves it. When he played it for the first time this year, he looked at me with enthusiasm, sort of being
And it is obviously a carbon copy of All I Want for Christmas Is You. It's an attempt to do it, isn't it? But what's clever about it is they don't try, even with that voice, they don't try and imitate Mariah at the beginning, do they? They don't seduce you. It starts with, "You're here," like straight in. Like there's no pissing about.
And the other one, 2013, this is more of a UK-based one, though.
The Darkness Don't Let the Bells End.
No, do you know what? That was like 1,000 years ago. I don't think that even counts. It's something like 2006 or something.
That is 1,000 years ago.
I think it's too far away. Yeah, that's right. It's 1,000 years.
Go on.
Leona Lewis, One More Sleep.
Oh yeah, that is
That's
but again,
good.
it's like Let's Do a Mariah, isn't it? What's yours, Arion? What did they listen to in Australia at Christmas time?
We do actually have a bunch of Australianized Christmas carols about, like, if Santa was an Aussie, he would have to wear a swimming costume to cope with the hot Australian night. And, you know, he'd ride a Subaru from here to Dunedoo. Like, these kind of
But
sort
do they
of
get
mock...
airplay?
They're the ones that you sing at your, like, nativity play and so on.
I imagine it's a pretty rich theme of content, isn't it? It's like, if this thing associated with Christmas was in
Yeah.
Australia...
Yeah, then it'd be all throwing stuff on the Barbie. Yeah.
You're not going to get Leona Lewis covering that, though.
Tomorrow.
Apparently he also...
Love the show? Support the show. Patreon.com/retrospectors. Part of the Acast Creator Network.